Hello and welcome back to Conquering My Collection. In this video I'm going to be talking about a film that I've seen many times before but have never seen in this format, which is 4K, and the film is Gremlins. So this is the 4K version, obviously. I kind of like the cover. I know that some of the recent kind of Fox releases like Home Alone, they've done very generic kind of one primary color and then just some photoshopping, and it's kind of cool. I mean, the original poster you just cannot beat for this film. I mean, God, that would just look incredible on this nice slipcover. But either way, it is Gremlins. It's a film I've grown up with, and a film that I love. And I bought it, I think, maybe just a few days before Christmas, and we watched it on Christmas evening. We had a nice little marathon of films on Christmas Day, which is a very low key affair. We watched Soul in the morning, the new Pixar film, which I really enjoyed. And then we watched A Nightmare Before Christmas, which I'd never seen before. That was a present Connie got me for Christmas. And then rounded off with Gremlins in 4K. I have to say, I mean, there's a lot I want to talk about here. And I don't know how in-depth I'm going to get here. But with Gremlins, it's a film that I grew up with and absolutely loved and hadn't really watched properly in quite a few years. So I was intrigued to see the 4K. And it looks incredible. There's a really great 4K transfer. And you know, these with older films, I don't know. I mean, it's tricky. It's difficult. I've yet to watch a 4K transfer where I've been like, holy fuck! Like it just doesn't provide with it. It's not a quantum leap to the point where it's going to be amazing, but I can tell how much more detail is in there, and the colors look great, and it just yeah, and it's just nice knowing that you're watching one of your favorite films in the best possible quality imaginable and available out there on the home video market. Anyway, so I really enjoyed seeing it in 4K, and I actually noticed something that I'd never noticed before, which made me think like, wow, the 4K is really revealing things, but it isn't really, because there isn't something that you wouldn't see without 4K. You could see this on the VHS if you really paid attention, unless it was what do they even call it? Not pan and scan. It could be pan and scan. I'm not sure. It depends. I mean, there's letterboxed, pan and scan, full frame. I don't know. Either way, it could have been cut off because it is something on the side of the frame. But either way, it's not something that you could have seen on DVD. Let's put it that way. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I'll talk about the film first because I want to talk about the film. I want to talk about the extras, and I want to talk about that thing I just mentioned that I'd never seen before. The film itself, I love it. I love the music that is used in the film. I love the kind of picturesque, kind of stylistic design of the town that the story is set in, and the way that, I mean, you look at the opening shot of the town, it looks like a postcard, and that was a very intentional stylistic choice by the director, Joe Dante, because he realized that with these creatures, these gremlins, that he wanted it to be more, not fairy tale-esque, but had the touch of, you know, kind of storybook quality to it, so that when things get really cartoony towards the end, it kind of fits in with the general feel of the rest of the movie and the way that everything looks. I think that works nicely. It's subtle as well. It doesn't feel like the whole town is cartoony, but when you do get those wider shots, even the final shot of the film, it looks very much like something you'd see in a storybook, and it works very nicely with the overall film and the way everything looks, I think. And it's about this, you know, if you watch this video, you've seen Gremlins, but for housekeeping purposes, it's about this guy, Randall Peltzer, I believe was his name, who is trying to get a Christmas present for his son, and he goes to this kind of back alley basement kind of curiosity shop and finds this old Chinese man in there with a small creature called a mogwai. And he ends up purchasing this kind of behind the old Chinese man's back, and takes it home to his son Billy. And Billy is, you know, enamored with this little creature called Gizmo. He calls him Gizmo, and I think the father calls him Gizmo, and he just keeps that name. And the father's an inventor, and I love all the inventions and kind of the fact that they never work. And as a kid, I was always I just loved inventions and little cool gadgets and stuff. Like I loved, I forget the character's name now in the Goonies, the kid who has all the gadgets and stuff. I loved all just gadgets and things that kind of did cool stuff. So even though they didn't work, I just loved seeing them on screen. And it provides a few funny moments in the film. And I liked the kind of the character quirk that his father was this kind of failed inventor. You know, he's endearing and he has a real fatherly, warm presence to him. And so you kind of can't help but love him, even though he's miserably failing at his career choice. And so we have Billy, who works at a local bank, and there's definitely a touch of It's a Wonderful Life there with the bank, and with just the feel of the town square. But the woman, I forget the woman's name now, she's this real bitch, like a real psychotic. Like you just want to give her a slap because she wants to basically kill Billy's dog because she's such a ruthless tyrant, and she's kind of an analog for Potter in It's a Wonderful Life. I feel like she's kind of that kind of it's a very small part of the story, but it feels very much of that ilk, and you see It's a Wonderful Life in the film itself. Billy's mother is watching it at some point, and so that was my first exposure to It's a Wonderful Life, and that's interesting because she's watching it, and it's a scene when he comes back, and he's like, it's this really triumphant moment in It's a Wonderful Life, and she's kind of tearing up a bit, and Billy's like, "What's the matter?" She's like, "Oh, just the movie. It's sad," and it's not sad. But it kind of is, and I'm not sure. I think she's cutting onions. I don't know if like the onions are making it. She's kind of, I don't know. It's a weird one. As I was watching it now, I was like, is she kind of hiding the fact that the movie's making her emotional? I don't know. Anyway, the minor point, doesn't matter. And then we have the rules, which apparently was one of the things that the studio was really not too keen on. They didn't like these rules. They thought that the audience was not going to be able to follow it, and opening the movie with these 3 rules was going to be too confusing, and it turned out it was perfect. It was just what the movie needed. The 3 rules: you can't feed the mogwai after midnight, you can't expose him to direct sunlight or even any bright light in particular, and don't get him wet. And of course, he gets exposed to bright light in the film at the very beginning. He gets wet and multiplies and creates new mogwai. And then those new mogwai, the evil mogwai, they eat after midnight. They conspire against Billy to kind of pull the wire out of his clock. And they force him to, well, they don't force him, but they nag him to get some food. He doesn't realize it's past midnight. And they eat and turn into these monstrous gremlins. And honestly, like, I've always enjoyed, when the Gremlins turn up in the film, and it's fun when they create chaos, but I was always like, I loved Gizmo as a kid, and that was kind of like, I just wanted to see the Gremlins go, because any threat to Gizmo was like kind of a, something that really got me kind of like, don't you fucking harm Gizmo, but watching it now, I just love the Gremlins. I mean, they're so much fun. They're just absolute fucking cunts. They're just like, they were born to be shitheads, and the bar scene is just incredible. Like, it's just a complete, like, Looney Tunes cartoon, and I love that about it. It's just complete chaos. And I just love that they spent so much money on all of these creature designs and the puppets, and it was very tough for them to get all this stuff to work. And the cinema scene when they're watching Snow White is just it's just such a wonderful celebration of how crazy these characters are. And I just love the film. It's so much fun. You got some really good kind of side performances. You got Dick Miller, who's always great when he pops up in these films to do kind of small character pieces. And then Phoebe Cates, who has a really good monologue about her father coming down the chimney as Santa Claus when she was a kid. And that always stuck out when I was watching it as a child, was that very dark moment. And it kind of it gave the film an extra kick of something that, it wasn't just this complete fun roller coaster ride of gremlin carnage. And it is quite a violent film as well. It's like a 15 rated film when I had it on video. And I think, it was a 15 rated film when it came out in the UK as well. There's a great story that Edgar Wright recently talked about on the Films to Be Buried With podcast. I'll just tell it now if anyone hasn't heard it. When he was a kid, Gremlins was huge, and there was all this merchandise, but you couldn't go see it because it was a 15. So Edgar Wright was, I think, maybe 10, 11, 12, something like that. And so he went along to the cinema, watched the film in I think a Saturday matinee or something like that, and then went to the manager or the projectionist of the cinema, his local cinema, and had the Gremlins novelization book with him and said, "Look, we've read the film, we know what happens, we're not going to be scared, can you please let us watch Gremlins?" And the theater manager went, "Come back again at 2:00, and he let them in and watched it. And he said it was one of the most exciting cinema experiences of his life, because he felt like he was about to get thrown out at any moment for being there when he wasn't supposed to be. A really cool story. But this was a controversial film. It did introduce, along with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, it introduced the PG-13 rating, because it was rated PG and many people thought it wasn't suitable for young children. So, and understandably, it's quite a grim movie, and it was supposed to be even grimmer, actually. The original script by Chris Columbus saw Billy come home at one point and find his mother's head rolling down the stairs. It is really dark, and so they toned that back a bit. And actually, Gizmo was supposed to turn into Spike, the kind of the leader of the Gremlins. That was the original intent. And Spielberg, who's like producing the film, he kind of went, no, Gizmo needs to stay. He needs to be in the second half of the film. People are going to love him, and he made the right choice, I think. But yeah, Chris Columbus, who wrote this film, he went on to direct films like Home Alone, Home Alone 2, the first couple of Harry Potter movies. I think he directed Mrs. Doubtfire as well. But this was, I guess, one of his first big films that he wrote. And the last scene of the film, when they're saying goodbye to Gizmo and the Chinese man turns up, that was completely redone on the day, and they just improvised the whole scene. And that was the day that Chris Columbus came on set with his parents to show them, hey, here's this film that they're making that I wrote, and they didn't use any of his dialogue or script, which just sounds awful. Anyway, I go on and on about this film. It's just, do I need to really review it in depth? Not really, but it's just, I love the film. And after watching it, I did rip the Blu-ray and ripped the 2 audio commentaries and listened to them. And wow, I have to talk about the audio commentaries on this release. And I guess they were released on the original DVD in the mid-2000s. So you have, the first one I listened to was the actor's commentary, which has Joe Dante, the director, Howie Mandel, who did the voice of Gizmo, Phoebe Cates, who plays whatever the girl's name in the film is, and Zach Galligan, who played Billy. Now, oh, and Dick Miller as well. I forget that Dick Miller was in the commentary as well because he barely says anything. So Joe Dante opens a commentary saying, like, this is more of an actor's commentary. I've already done a director's commentary. You can listen to that one. This is more focused on the actors. So we have Howie Mandel, who's like cracking jokes, and he's clearly owning the room and making very successful jokes that Joe Dante's laughing at. Phoebe Cates is finding very amusing. Phoebe Cates has just kind of sat there, won't speak unless spoken to pretty much, and doesn't really remember much. Seems like she's fond of the film, but she just doesn't have much to say about it. Then you have Dick Miller, who at times seems like he's not even aware that he's doing a commentary, and it's just like, oh yeah, well yeah, he seems like he's in another world. But he also seems to be a fan of the movie, and he really enjoys it. Then you have Zach Galligan, who played Billy, and I haven't really seen him in any other movie. Obviously Gremlins 2, and so I can only assume that he didn't have a huge career after that. And so Gremlins clearly means a lot to him. He was a young kid when he made it, quite a fairly young actor. And for what they say in the commentary, he was very enthusiastic on the set and asking people about things, and kind of almost like a bit of a nerd, a bit of a geek, And they kind of playfully tease him throughout the first half of the commentary. They're kind of, it's kind of in good fun, but he's getting really excited and talking about all these details, and they're kind of like, how do you remember this? And it gets a bit like, oh, all right, let's just let he's excited about talking about the film. It felt like it was going down a road which was going to be a little bit uncomfortable later on. Then it kind of evened out a bit. About halfway through the commentary, maybe like an hour into the movie, maybe, Zach Galligan says, oh, I remember this scene. I had to get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I was just exhausted when we shot this. And Joe Dante interjects and he says, if I was editing this commentary, I would just cut that bit out. And there's just this like silence, and Zach Galligan's like, you cut that out? Why? It's just not very interesting. And Zach Galligan's like, what do you mean it's not interesting? And he says, it's just not very interesting. Airbag. Like, it just completely nuked the commentary from orbit. I mean, it was the only way to be sure. They tried to recover, but it just destroyed it. Like, Zach Galligan is clearly just thinking to himself, all right, fuck you then. I won't talk about it. Like, why am I here? I'm here to do the commentary, to talk about my experiences on the film. I'm trying to be enthusiastic. I'm trying to drive the commentary along. And you just tell me you're not very interesting. Why are you talking about this? It was such a dick move. And I think that maybe Joe Dante was just trying to like go along with the fun of it and kind of just ribbing Zach Galligan. It went too far. And I think he could have easily saved it. He went, I'm just joking, just kidding, or something like that. But just, no, he's just not very interesting. And then Howie Mandel tries to save it. He's like, well, maybe I could make that story interesting. He's like, no, I don't think you could make that interesting either. And there's just like 2 to 3 minutes, I think, of just dead silence. And then they get back into it, and it feels very much like the producers of the commentary kind of were trying to salvage it, because every now and then it'll just go silent, and then someone will say something as if prompted, like silence, and then Phoebe Cates will go like, yeah, well, I remember that the first time it feels like she's being questioned and answering something, but we don't hear the question, which makes me wonder, why did they leave in the original awkward exchange? It just seems very odd and very strange. And I was thinking, am I just reading too much into this? I went back and listened to it again. I'm definitely not. Like, it really just, it just sucked the life out of the whole thing. And you know what? throughout the rest of the commentary, Joe Dante's comments, not very interesting. They really weren't that interesting because it just got to a point where without the enthusiasm of Zach driving things forward and filling in those gaps with things that he was, had experienced, and he clearly remembered the film better than anyone else, and Joe Dante, I did go and listen to the director's commentary with also the producers, and I think the guy who worked on the effects of the puppets. That's a great commentary. There's lots of great information in that, and clearly Joe Dante had kind of gotten a lot of his information out. By the time he did the second one, there wasn't a whole lot to say for him, and he has someone who's very enthusiastic and offering something different and bringing all this enthusiasm and all these little behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and he's like, not very interesting. Why the fuck even put him in there then? Like, it was really strange and a little bit uncomfortable. Zach kind of got back into it again as the commentary was closing out. But yeah, I mean, there's a bit where Zach is talking about, my first day of shooting with Dick Miller, and I was asking him all these questions about like all the films that he'd done and everything. I was being really enthusiastic and maybe a bit annoying. And then they say, do you remember that, Dick? And Dick's like, yeah. And they're like, do you remember anything about it in specific? He's like, no, it was interesting. Like, so all Dick Miller has to offer is like, it was interesting, And then Phoebe Cates, there's a really awkward bit where Zach is talking about auditioning for the film. And he says that, and I did the chemistry audition with Phoebe. Phoebe, do you remember this? And she's like, I remember auditioning, but not with you. And the way she phrases it is such a like put down, condescending thing. And he's like, no, we definitely auditioned together. That's what got me. And she's like, like it's just a weird vibe. Like I don't know. It feels like they don't want him to be there, and I don't know why. And it was kind of unfortunate. And I have read that the commentary for Gremlins 2, Zach is very much withdrawn again, and someone has theorized that perhaps he just felt again like he just wasn't gonna put himself out there and talk about stuff as much because Joe Dante had been like, that's not very interesting. So that was a real shame. Anyway, I enjoyed the commentaries for what they were, but that was just an abortion of an audio commentary. I just couldn't believe it. Now, the Blu-ray itself, I don't know if I've actually checked this. Maybe I should actually go back and do this. But apparently there's over 10 minutes of footage not seen in cinemas, but I couldn't find the deleted scenes. Maybe I just missed them somewhere. And it certainly doesn't mean that it's an extended cut of the movie. So this had the 4K and the Blu-ray included on this package. Has the two audio commentaries, theatrical trailers, and a photo gallery. Not that much at all. So what I would recommend if you're a Gremlins fan, you're thinking about picking up the 4K, if you already have the Diamond Deluxe Edition, which I do have, hold on to this one, because this has a second disc of extras that is not included in the 4K package. And this is a gorgeous release. I really love the Diamond Deluxe Editions. The only problem is they are absolute fingerprint magnets and get easily scuffed. So this one is really rough at the moment. Well, at the moment it's just going to get rougher as time goes on, but it's really nice, like shiny material, but it just it picks up dust and scratches super easily. And yeah, it has a second disc full of extras that have, I think, like there's a documentary, something like that. And yeah, so I would absolutely recommend holding on to that. But this is just a fantastic package, and it feels really deluxe. I just think that the kind of super glossy finish, maybe they could have put like a protective sleeve around it as part of the packaging. I don't know, but it is worth holding on to this. And I don't know where else you could get the second disc. Maybe there's another special release, but that's the one I'm holding on to because it has all the other extras. Anyway, so that's it. I'll leave it there. I love Gremlins. I really loved revisiting this film. I could talk about it in so much more depth, but really I'd just be here for an hour, and you wouldn't want to hear it, and I'd probably have wasted another 40 minutes of my time talking about the film. But I loved revisiting it, and I kind of enjoyed not revisiting. I've never listened. I feel like I would have listened to the audio commentary before, but I guess I haven't because none of it felt new to me. So I take that back. I did not enjoy revisiting the audio commentaries because I'd never visited them in the first place. So I kind of enjoyed listening to the commentaries for the first time. The second one was great. The second one was really, really good. Lots of information. I forgot to say, okay, we'll round off with this. In the scene where, is it Randall? I think it's Randall, or Randy, the father of Billy. He's at this inventor convention, and he's at this phone booth, and in the background, all this stuff is going on. And suddenly I noticed Steven Spielberg driving past the camera in a go-kart with his leg up in a cast, and he kind of drives around the scene. Apparently also in that scene you can spot Jerry Goldsmith, and the music is fantastic. I won't go into too much detail, but I love the score of this film. It's just It's fucking great. It's really fucking great. And there's some good stories about the music in the commentary, which I'll leave for you to discover for yourselves. But in the background, there is literally the H.G. Wells time machine from the movie, which I haven't seen, but it's a very iconic-looking time machine that I've seen before. I think they maybe lampooned it in like a Sonic the Hedgehog episode, or like a series of episodes where they travel back through time. It looks very similar. I think that's how I recognize it. But anyway, the H.G. Wells time machine from the movie that they made is in the background. And, you know, we come in close on Randall on the phone, and then we cut back to Billy or his mother, whoever's on the other end of the phone, and then we cut back, and the time machine is gone, and there's like, I think bits of like black debris and smoke and maybe some ashes, and there's just people just wandering around like, where did it go? Like, where the fuck? So here's your hot take and thing you probably didn't know about Gremlins. It is technically a time travel movie, and I didn't even spot this. Connie went, "Did you see that thing just disappear?" I'm like, "What thing? What are you talking about?" And it's so obvious once you see it. And I don't know how I've never noticed it, and I've spoken to other people who are big fans of this film. They'd never noticed it either. And so it's just one of those really weird, cool Easter eggs. And the film is full of these Easter eggs. I mean, I think there's like an E.T. plushie in the department store near the end where the Gremlin's hiding. There's loads of Easter eggs, like just dozens of them. They talk about many of them in the commentary. Again, I'll leave that to you guys to discover in the commentary if you haven't listened to them yet. They also kind of, one more thing in the commentary is that they talk about Corey Feldman, and Joe Dante's like, wow, at the time he was just like one of the best child actors in Hollywood. And, you know, and there's like emphasis on like at the time. And Harry Mandel's like, was this before or after he was friends with Michael Jackson? He's like, oh, no, that was before. That was before. And they make another kind of, it feels like they want to kind of take the piss out of Corey Feldman, but they don't want to be like politically incorrect. And Harry Mandel's like, that's okay to say that, right? And Joe Dante's like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, there's another weird spot where it's like, well, what are you saying? What are you trying not to say? I don't know. Anyway, Gremlins, 4K. Yeah, loved revisiting this film. I really did. Did I even mention? I kind of went off track. So the Phoebe Cates, I'm trying to like grab all these like strands and threads I've been kind of weaving and throwing out there at random throughout the video. The Phoebe Cates monologue about her father, that was like, the studio was just like, we have to delete that. Like, the film is great, just that scene needs to go. And they showed it in previews, and they're like, great, people love the film, we still need to get rid of that scene. And Joe Dante just kept holding on to it. He's like, no, this is like the best scene of the film, performance-wise. It's not a film about great performances, but this is a really great moment that needs to stay in there. It's such a huge part of her character. And the setup to, the payoff to the setup that she doesn't like Christmas. And Spielberg, who was the producer on the film, he came in and he said, look, I don't think the scene's all that good, but you're the director, and so it's going to stay in. And the studio still tried to, after that, get the scene removed. So it's really strange. It is one of the best scenes in the film, and a really memorable thing that kind of just, again, stood out when I was a kid. And it almost was never in the movie because the studio didn't get it. So yeah, it's good that some directors like Joe Dante will fight for those scenes to stay in the film when they're making a film in the studio system. But not so great when directors like Joe Dante act like complete dickheads in the audio commentaries of films where they have their cast member who's so enthused about the film that they worked on with him, and he's just like, you're not very interesting. Like, what? Like, again, there's these awkward gaps in the commentary where they're talking about like, okay, how do we salvage this or something. I'd love to know the behind the scenes of that. I really, really would, but you know, they left in the awkward exchange anyway and put it on the disc. So it's a very strange one. I don't know. Maybe they thought it was funny. Maybe it's a practical joke. I don't know. Maybe they were just like, okay, let's try and make out like we had to disagree. I don't think that's the case. You can it's awkward. You can feel the awkwardness seeping through the headphones into your brain, and it's like, ugh, this is not fun. Anyway, enough rambling. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.